There is a number in NFL history that refuses to be touched. Not matched, not broken, not even approached. 5.7 yards per carry over an entire career. That number belongs to Marion Motley. And the fact that most fans don't know his name tells you everything that's wrong with how football history is remembered. Before an NFL became a polished machine, before highlight packages and endorsement deals, Motley was doing something far more dangerous. He was running straight through defenses and straight through a league that wasn't sure if it even wanted him there. He wasn't just a running back, he was a battering ram on offense, a wall in pass protection, and a linebacker when the game demanded violence. And he did it all while carrying the weight of being one of the first black men allowed through pro football's front door. This story isn't just about greatness, it's about what greatness costs when the system isn't built for you to survive it. Because Marion Motley didn't just help win championships, he helped change the sport. And once football took everything it needed from him, it quietly moved on. If you value the stories that history books skim over, like the video, drop a comment, and subscribe. This is Old School Sundays, and this one matters. Marion Motley's story doesn't begin with stardom. It begins with geography, with being born in the South, moved north, and still never fully escaping the lines America drew around him. Born in Georgia and raised in Canton, Ohio, Motley grew up in a town that worshipped football and enshrined legends, but didn't promise equality. Canton produced heroes, but it also produced gatekeepers. At Canton McKinley High School, Motley quickly revealed what separated him from everyone else. He wasn't just strong, he was violent with purpose. He ran with intent, blocked with malice, and carried himself like someone who knew football might be his only way out. Winning came naturally, losing didn't. And the few times McKinley did lose, it was usually to one program across town, Massillon Washington High School. That mattered because Massillon was coached by a man named Paul Brown. At the time, Brown was just another rival coach standing in Motley's way. But destiny has a habit of hiding in plain sight. Brown saw Motley firsthand, game after game, long before the rest of the football world ever would. He saw the size, the power, the intelligence. What he couldn't see yet was how much resistance the sport itself would put in front of players like Marion Motley. After high school, Motley's path was anything but smooth. He enrolled at a historically black college, then transferred across the country to Nevada, chasing better competition and bigger opportunity. He ran against major West Coast programs, held his own, and looked like a future pro. Then came the knee injury, the derailment, the quiet exit. Football slipped away. Real life closed in. Motley returned to Canton and went to work, the steel mill looming like a permanent sentence. That wasn't the romantic part of the story. This was the part where the most great talents disappear. And that's the part people forget. Because before Marion Motley ever broke a barrier, before he ran over defenders and rewrote expectations, he was a man standing at the edge of obscurity, injured, overlooked, and one bad break away from never being remembered at all. World War II changed the course of American history, but for Marion Motley, it also reopened a door he thought had slammed shut. With college behind him and his knee already whispering warnings about the future, Motley enlisted into the U.S. Navy in 1944. Like so many men of his generation, football became secondary to survival, or so it seemed. He was sent to the Great Lakes Naval Training Station, where military football teams quietly became proving grounds stacked with elite talent. And waiting there, improbably, almost unrealistically, was Paul Brown. The same coach whose teams had blocked Motley's path in high school now held his future again, this time dressed in Navy colors. At Great Lakes, Motley wasn't protected or preserved. He was used everywhere. Fullback, linebacker, offense and defense, blocking, tackling, absorbing punishment without complaint. This wasn't showcase football. This was evaluation under pressure. Brown watched closely. He saw a man who understood angles, timing, leverage. A player who didn't just survive contact, he controlled it. Then came the game that changed everything. Late in the war, Great Lakes lined up against Notre Dame, the most powerful name in college football. Motley was eligible for discharge before kickoff. He didn't leave, he stayed. And in a dominant win that echoed across the country, Motley was everywhere, running through people, blocking like a lineman, executing concepts Brown was experimenting with, ideas that would later reshape offensive football. When the war ended, Motley returned to Canton again, back to work, back to reality. His plan was simple: save money, go back to Nevada, finish his degree. Football felt like a chapter that had already been written without him. Then Paul Brown announced something new: a professional football team in Cleveland. Motley reached out asking for a tryout. Brown turned him down, said he had enough fullbacks. For Marion Motley, that rejection felt final, because when a man like Paul Brown says no, history usually listens. What Motley didn't know was that the door hadn't closed, it had only narrowed. And when it opened again, it wouldn't be for the reason anyone expected. When Marion Motley finally arrived at Cleveland Browns training camp in 1964, it wasn't because the league suddenly discovered his talent. It was because Bill Willis had been invited first. Motley would later say he believed the team wanted him there as a roommate, not as a roster lock. That's how thin the margin was. That's how conditional opportunity looked for black players in that era. Motley didn't argue, he didn't plead. He ran. From the first practices, it became obvious something unexpected was happening. He wasn't just surviving drills, he was dominating them. He blocked like an offensive lineman, hit holes with violence, and showed a burst that didn't match his size. Whatever assumptions existed about why he'd been invited collapsed quickly. Marion Motley made the team because cutting him would have exposed the lie. When Motley and Willis stepped onto the field that fall, professional football crossed a line it had avoided for over a decade. They became two of the first black players of the modern era to play regularly in pro football, months before Jackie Robinson would debut in Major League Baseball. The history books frame that moment politely. The reality was anything but. Motley was kicked, stepped on, spit at. Officials watched and looked away. Opponents hurled slurs while trying to injure him. And when the Browns traveled, the abuse didn't stop at the sideline. Threatening letters arrived, hotels refused service. In one city, the team was told Motley and Willis weren't welcome until Paul Brown threatened to move the entire roster elsewhere. What changed wasn't hearts, it was fear. Because while the hate rained down, Motley kept running. Nearly a first down every time he touched the ball, through arms, through bodies, through intent. Defenders stopped talking because they were too busy trying to survive the collision. And something else happened quietly in the stands. Black fans showed up by the thousands. For the first time, many saw themselves reflected on a professional football field, not as mascots or labor, but as stars. Motley understood what that meant. He also understood what it cost. Breaking the barrier didn't make him feel safe, it made him feel visible. And in football, visibility paints a target, especially when you're changing the rules just by being great. Once the barrier was broken, Marion Motley didn't just play professional football, he bent it to his will. As the Browns settled into the new All-America Football Conference, something became clear almost immediately. This team wasn't just good, it was inevitable. And at the center of that inevitability was Motley. Cleveland didn't win by finesse, they won by imposing their will. And Motley was the blunt instrument that made everything else work. Paul Brown built his offense on speed, timing, and precision. But every great machine needs a force that turns space into fear. That was Motley. Trap plays up the middle became a nightmare because defenders were invited in only to be punished for accepting the invitation. Once Motley hit the hole, the decision-making was over. You either got in front of him or you got out the way. The results were overwhelming. Cleveland won the AAFC championship every single year of the league's existence. 4 seasons, 4 titles, Motley wasn't padding numbers. He was breaking games. When the Browns needed control, he delivered it. When they needed momentum, he ripped it out of defenses. And when the postseason arrived, the violence intensified. Championship games didn't slow him down. They amplified him. What made Motley different wasn't just production, it was responsibility. He blocked like a lineman, caught passes when needed, and still lined up on defense in short yardage situations. He wasn't specialized, he was essential. Teammates understood it, opponents dreaded it. Coaches built game plans around surviving him, not stopping him. And yet, looming over all of it was a quiet disrespect. The AAFC wasn't the NFL, which meant when the league folded, the dominance was treated like a footnote instead of a warning. Records blurred, achievements were softened, the Browns were called untested, their stars were called unproven. Marion Motley heard it all. So when Cleveland was absorbed into the NFL, the narrative was already written by skeptics. This was where the real football lived. This was where the Browns and Motley would finally be exposed. What they didn't realize was that Marion Motley didn't need the league's validation. He was about to take it anyway and do it on the biggest stage football had to offer. When the Cleveland Browns entered the NFL in 1950, the tone shifted immediately. This wasn't expansion curiosity anymore. This was resentment. Veterans of the old league believed the Browns, and especially their stars, were living off inflated reputations. The AAFC, they said, wasn't real football. Marion Motley took that personally. From the opening weeks, it was obvious the NFL wasn't prepared for him. Not because he was flashy, but because he was efficient in a way the league wasn't built to survive. Motley didn't need volume, he needed daylight. And when he got it, defenses paid in chunks. The season defining moment came against the Pittsburgh Steelers. On paper, it looked impossible. In reality, it was humiliation. Motley touched the ball only a handful of times, but every carry felt like a crisis. By the end of the day, he had ripped off one of the most absurd efficiency performances the league had ever seen, including long touchdowns that broke games open before defenders could even adjust. It wasn't just dominance, it was proof. And it forced a reckoning. The Browns didn't just compete in the NFL, they won it. In their very first season, Cleveland captured the league championship. Motley was unanimously recognized as the best at his position that year, not because he was protected, but because he was unavoidable. Even with limited carries, even with defenders keying on him, he dictated outcomes. But the cost was mounting. Every run was violent, every block was a collision, and unlike other stars, Motley wasn't shielded. He was hit late, stepped on, challenged physically and symbolically. His knees, already scarred from earlier years, absorbed it all. Still, he never complained. He never asked for fewer carries or easier usage. He did what he'd always done, absorbed punishment so others could shine. Quarterback Otto Graham thrived. The offense flourished. Cleveland stayed on top. But football always collects its debt. By the end of that championship run, Motley had proven everything there was to prove. He had conquered the AAFC, he had silenced the NFL, and in doing so, he had pushed his body to a breaking point the league would never acknowledge. Because once the damage became visible, the tone changed. And suddenly, the question wasn't how great Marion Motley was, it was how quickly football could move on without him. The fall didn't come all at once. It crept in quietly, disguised as soreness, stiffness, and mornings where Marion Motley's knees didn't answer the call the way they used to. By 1951, the collisions that once fueled Cleveland's dominance were exacting their price. Motley was still effective, still respected, but the violence that made him great had finally begun to take something back. He fought through it. That's the part that rarely gets told. He adjusted his style, relied more on instincts than explosion, and continued doing the thankless work. Blocking, absorbing contact, protecting teammates. But football is ruthless with aging bodies, especially when they belong to the men the system never fully valued in the first place. As his role shrank, so did the patience around him. By 1953, it was clear the Browns were moving on. Motley believed he could still play. He showed up to camp ready to prove it. Paul Brown made the decision for him. Rather than be cut, Motley walked away, quietly, without ceremony. A man who helped build a dynasty exited through a side door. He tried once more in Pittsburgh, switching positions, sacrificing pride, doing whatever it took to stay in the league. It didn't last. And when his playing days ended, he did what so many great players do. He tried to stay in the game as a coach. That door never opened. Time after time, he was told there were no opportunities, no vacancies, no space. The same league that used him to break barriers and win championships suddenly had nothing for him. Motley noticed who was being hired. He asked the question out loud. Was football ready for a black coach? The answers he got were carefully worded and painfully familiar. So he worked, outside the game, sales, labor, public service, while the sport he helped modernize moved forward without him. In 1968, Marion Motley was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in his hometown of Canton. The honor was deserved. The timing was telling. Football finally immortalized him long after it had decided it no longer needed him. That is the cruel symmetry of Marion Motley's career. He gave the game everything, and the game gave him silence in return. Marion Motley's legacy isn't just measured in yards or championships. It lives in what the game looks like because he endured it. He proved that power and intelligence could exist in the same body. that greatness didn't need permission, and that barriers only fall when someone is willing to run straight through them. He helped build a dynasty, he helped change professional football, and for decades, his name barely traveled with the story. That's why we do this here. If you believe legends like Marion Motley deserve to be remembered the right way, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share this story so it reaches people who never learned it in the first place. This is Old School Sundays, where football history gets its respect back. Thanks for watching.